Oh, a finish from Leacher here to the box. Hotter, will he go for goal? Goes for goal. Here it is!
Might drop here, Ziggins! Off the line by Ring! Again!
Welcome to the Bees Analytica podcast. Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the Bees Analytica podcast. On this week, me and the guys are going to do a bit of a mid-season review, going through the 24 teams, where we think they could strengthen in January, how they've done so far, and a standout player. On this week's episode, I have Alfie, Andy and James with me to discuss through this week. How are we doing, gents? We all have a good Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, good, thanks, you.
Yeah, good Christmas.
It's one of them weird ones, isn't it? We haven't been able really to do much because of the lockdown, but it's been nice just to settle down for a few weeks and calm, but we're back on it this week. So first of all, we're going to start off with Wycombe Wanderers and go through their start to the season, who I think we can all agree are probably in the position we thought they would be come the start of the season. They've picked up 15 points so far this season, and 4 points away from safety. So just nothing more can be said, really, that they're at where we expect them to be, aren't they?
They're in the hunt for survival, which is exactly where they would have wanted to be at this stage of the season.
As sad as it is, they're actually probably better off than I would have imagined at this stage of the season in terms of only 4 points from safety. I would have expected it to be a lot bigger gap than that. But yeah, they are where they are because they're by far the smallest club in this league. They don't have the resources.
They're quite fortunate that it's such a poor league this year. There really is 5 or 6 teams that could genuinely go down, and they're just one of the options. But you know, they're in there with a fighting chance.
And that's all their fans wanted: come up and put up a fight.
They remind me of Luton last year. Luton were especially poor, and then because obviously after lockdown they went on some form of miracle run and managed to claw themselves out of it. And now look at them; they've done really well under Nathan Jones, clawed back up. But I just think Wycombe are just so unfortunate this year. The games come so thick and fast. There is no time to reset and take a break and get yourself back
and also
get a run.
Maybe their squad size, because with the games and the injuries and the rotation you need, they don't have the best squad depth, and that is probably another factor.
Yeah,
that feeds into that.
No fans at Adams Park. That's got to have some sort of effect. Yeah. You'd think they'd give them a boost in the last few minutes of matches to get them over the line.
Well, sort of like what Burton Albion's home crowd used to do, where
they'd suck the ball in sometimes.
They would act as like a 12th man that they really did need when they were in this league.
Definitely. Alf, who's caught your eye for Wycombe so far this season then? Like, any surprise packages?
Surprise package, I'm very happy about it, but Gareth McCleary is a free transfer. I mean, don't get me wrong, he hasn't propelled them to new levels, but he's exactly what Wycombe need. He's a quick winger, beats his man and puts a ball in the box. That's exactly what they need. And I've really been impressed with him. But in terms of star player, I think I really like Scott Caskin. He works hard. You'll never see him moaning about having to track back, or you'll never see him let a man go. So for me, I think he's been enjoyable to watch and a surprise package.
Are we in agreement with that, boys? Or I know Andy might have different names on this list.
I also have McCleary down because, as Alfie has said, it's invaluable at their level to have someone who can whip such a good ball into the box so consistently, and also his ability from outside the box as well. If he can just take a shot from an angle where there's maybe not a pass, or maybe there's nothing really going for him, he can just shoot, and he's got a good chance with his ability of finding the top corner. So that is again something else that they are very in need of. But I did put down Jacobson purely because of he's captain, and I think he's so important to them on the defensive side of it.
Yeah,
especially in a league where maybe they're in a league with a lot of big hitters that they're not at the level to deal with. Having someone of his experience just coaching some of their defenders who may not have played against such high quality attackers before, I think is invaluable. And his set piece as well. When you've got a dead ball like that, you've got a chance when you're Wycombe. When you've got a corner taker or a free kick taker as good as him, he's a very good player.
Is it 2 or 3 times now that he's scored from a corner this year? Or been close to it, and then subjectively
La-
been
last
ruled
year-
out.
Yeah, last year he scored 2 direct corners. Which
So he's been there a long time now, hasn't he? As well, though, that's like his 10th or 11th season with the club.
yeah, he's been there
And
a long
yeah,
time.
well, you see the number of corner goals Wickham score, so it's
It's what I think is good about Wickham is they've got a lot of players in that know what they're doing. McCleary's another one that
They know their role.
in the championship so long, especially the last few years with Reading being down the wrong end of the table. He knows what is needed to just keep your head above water, which is all Wickham are asking for this year. And I think the experience of him, players like Jacobson, Akinfenwa, Matt Bloomfield, they they know what's needed to win football matches, and I think they got a good blend.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Akinfenwa as most surprise player for them. It's like statistically, I've brought it up on the account a few times. His XG, I think, is at like 5.56 this season, which is ridiculous for a player that's still not scored a goal at this level. Obviously, you can attribute it down to a bit of poor finishing, better goalkeepers, and the limited chances, but it's just surprised me. And teams just seem to have panicked with him and don't know how to deal with it. I think it was Swansea. He had 38 aerial duels won out of 50, like in one game, which is ridiculous
I
for
guess
a forward.
maybe that's because how many forwards do you see that are built like Akinfenwa? He is a. I can't think of anyone that is anywhere near his build or his skill set. It's not something you face every week.
No, an absolute enigma of a player, I would say, is probably the best way. Yeah, his XG for the season is 4.05 and still not scored, which is ridiculous when you look at some of the locations he's had shots in. He's had one shot outside the box and maybe 2 or 3 outside that pom zone I've spoken about before, and still not scored. Which so they're creating chances. It just doesn't help when your striker up there is a 37-year-old Akinfenwa, who I think this is the first time he's played at this level, or second time in his career.
Well, I think it comes back to Ainsworth has said time and time again this season about what lets them down is not that they're getting outplayed, it's that good teams take their chances, especially at this level. Every team, if you give them a chance, they're going to score, and Wickham aren't doing that.
But then if you're Wickham and looking at those numbers, there's hope. It's not like they're dead and buried. With numbers like those, they are.
If you bring in a striker that's used to this level and you give him those chances, then he'll put them away. That's the difference.
I think that is just what they're missing.
Did they have the budget for it though? Unfortunately,
a forward who is adept at this championship
I saw they
level.
with Harry Robson-Kanu, which I think would be an
I
incredible
did
bit
see
of business because at this level, he's still, he's a bit of a donkey at Reading, but he had his moments where his finishing was second to none at the club for some years.
I think he knows what it takes to score goals in the championship. He's done it with Reading and West Brom, so he's.
But yeah, it comes down to budget again, and ultimately, if they've got enough to draw those players in.
Yeah, I think there's enough there. If they can string a few results together, they might surprise a few. If they stage an escape, they've done it before in League Two. They've done it in League One. Can Gareth Ainsworth get that magic going again and get them up, propel them up the league table?
I hope so. It's a story. It's a nice story.
We'll move up onto the table then into Rotherham. And I'll open the discussion up here. The one that surprised me is Daniel Barcelosa. I can't say his name. But currently, their central midfielder, who's really, really good this year. Like, really good ball winner, really good playmaker, just up and down the pitch. I've really liked him. Coming in from Newcastle.
He's the 23-year-old, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
He's impressed me for how young he is and how he has performed. He's impressed me as well.
I think it's just kind of what you need in a midfielder, an all-round good at everything. Can just sit, pick it up, playmaker. I mean, they've been a bit unfortunate this year, and I feel sorry for Paul Warner, especially because he's had a few issues with COVID in the squad. Injuries have stacked up again. But they're just, again, in that same boat as Wickham, not good enough to really push on with the budget and the finances, and then to compete with the top end of the table, or even survive.
Yeah,
which is a shame.
I think the budget for them is what shot them in the foot, because what they've done time and time again when they've kept coming up to this level is they don't have the ability to strengthen their squad, which means they're always likely to go down because they're effectively just a very good League One team. That is what Rotherham are.
But they've sold players, good players. Where's the money that they? Why
Yeah.
can't they reinvest? I mean, Will Volks off to Cardiff,
Semi Ajayi.
West
Yeah.
Brom. Where's the reinvestment in the squad? It's not any better. The Hickway will no doubt go either at the end of this year or in January for a reasonable amount of money.
But if you're those players, you're not going to want to stay at Rotherham that are yo-yoing between the Championship and League One, are you?
No, but
So-
someone's got to be able to bring in to, they need the investment to become a steady Championship club. That won't just happen. And
I agree, but
Rotherham's got to try and entice those players to stay in to make them that force.
I think for Rotherham, they were probably not to the same extent as Wickham, but they were probably coming up with similar ambitions to Wickham. If we can just stay in the league the first season, who knows what we're capable of if we can push on from there.
Yeah.
I think they expected to be probably where they are now at this stage of the season.
Yeah, the big concern with me is their expansiveness in the defensive side. They've got the lowest passes per defensive action in the league by a country mile. So they're at 7.97 compared to Bournemouth, who are at 8.76. So nearly a whole pass less. So with being that intense in your press, it just leaves holes. And we know we praise Barnsley and teams that play this high pressing game, but we've mentioned it with the schedule is a nightmare trying to play this style of brand of football for 46 games. And then especially the holes it leaves.
But when you get it right, you get it right. I'd rather teams do that than sit behind a ball, personally. I think it makes for a great game. As I said, when it goes right, they do look a half decent outfit.
The difficulty is there's no sort of middle ground when you play like that. It either goes really well when it works, or when it doesn't work, that's the sort of games you can lose 2-3, 4-0. Yeah. Because you leave yourself so open at the back.
That's the thing. They've conceded nearly 2 goals a game consistently, or 1.5 goals a game consistently. They're conceding over 10 shots.
They are quite a youngish side. They do have quite a few 23s, 24s, 25s in their squad, don't they? So
they've got a handful of players, 4 or 5 of them, that are still experiencing their first season at this level.
Yeah.
And when you throw that in, a lot of players who've never, like Wickham, a lot of players who have never reached this level before, is probably due to a little bit of lack of quality. Rotherham.
Yeah, they are pretty much bang average for age, by the way. They are 26.3 and the average is 26.3. So they're bang average on the age scale, but that is thrown off a bit by Barnsley being the youngest and then Birmingham at the top end. So make of it what you will. So, James, we'll come to you. And who's impressed you for Rotherham this season then? Who've you looked at and thought, I would have them if I could?
Yeah, I've echoed your thoughts with Dan Barcela. But Freddie Ladapo has also quite impressed me.
Ladapo has impressed me.
He's not played at this level before, but he's got four goal contributions so far this season, which their top scorer's got 5. So he's not far off. He's just a big target man, but he's got quick feet. He'll get goals at this level if you can feed him.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. I've not seen much of him this season, to be fair.
I
remember him from Plymouth a few years ago as well, and he always caught my eye.
Him and highlights. Their other forward, Michael Smith, written down as well.
Another big.
He's a former Millwall striker, is it?
No, that's not him.
That's not.
That's Matt Smith.
That's not Michael Smith. Yeah.
He's
quite exactly what. So both very 6 foot plus.
Yeah, he's exactly what Rotherham need, because teams like Rotherham who don't have much of the ball need when they do get it, they need a centre to play off of, and he is exactly that. He's great at holding up the ball. He's a good striker at this level and at League One level, which is good for them if they do go straight back down. At least they've got a good striker for next season if they can keep him.
Yeah, I've gone the other side of the pitch to you, Andy. I went for their big centre half, Michael Iwenekiwe, or whatever his name is. Hickway, yeah. I really like him. He dominates strikers in the air. He's a big presence. I wouldn't be surprised if he's up there with some of the most aerial duels won per game. I don't know if Jake could check that, but
we'll have a look for you.
When I did watch Rotherham with him, I really like him.
I don't know about you, but he sort of reminds me of someone built in the mould of Semi Ajayi, who they have let go recently. He seems to have a lot of the positives.
Each other.
A lot of the positives about Ajayi seem to be present in a Heckway as well.
Interesting that Rotherham, again, they've fallen to that bracket. If they can stay up, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
If they don't, then it's go again and rebuild. At what point, though, do they say enough with Paul Warner and say we need to now try and solidify ourselves because it's just costing us a fortune?
Well,
Yo-yoing.
that's-
At what point do you then have to make the gamble and try and consolidate? Unless you're okay with being a yo-yo club and literally going up and going down because you're not spending anything, or do you want a bit more and do you want to hedge your bets maybe and spend a bit more with the hope that you earn a bit more by staying up? It's
I agree.
the gamble
Yeah.
you've got to make at some point.
Yeah, I think it is about, are they willing to make that gamble? Because if they're not, they're never going to change from what they are now.
Which they won't be content with. You know?
Yeah. Well,
Might just be
without,
fine for the club.
without being in the Rotherham boardroom, I wouldn't know what they're fine with. But I think, yeah, if
Fans must probably get frustrated if you're not really going anywhere.
if you were a Rotherham fan, you'd be screaming out for something to be done to get them away from what they currently are.
Or would you rather
Which
a football
is-
club come the end of the day? If they overextend and overspend, would you rather just have a football club?
Yeah, but that I get the impression Rotherham are probably content with what they do. Championship, scrap to stay up. If you go down, then you just have a good League One season next year and pretty much guarantee promotion from the beginning.
But there's been plenty of other
That's-
clubs that have come up from League One, not spent anything, and still consolidated themselves. So, what's going wrong at the
Yeah.
club? Not maybe being efficient.
I mean,
enough to stay up?
it can be done. You don't have to come up from League One and spend, and you can still stay here. But it's
Like the Preston and Bristol City when they first came up. I don't remember any of them breaking the bank.
Bristol spent a lot of money and have done. They have spent a fortune.
No.
Since
Yeah, a
being
lot of
in
the money
league.
on the kind of backgroundy stuff.
And
like
the
redoing-
playing squad. You look at players like
When-
Callas has cost them a fortune.
Yeah, now, but I mean, like 5 years ago when they first came up, when they had like Kieran Agard up front and Corey Smith, who's just left this year, they weren't signing the players that they're signing now. And the same with Preston. I don't remember them breaking the bank to sign anybody big.
But
I
then
mean, if
again,
that's what they're comfortable doing, then that's fair enough, and that's
I just
people at the club will know. But
I just
I'd
think
personally be frustrated if I just kept going up and down all the time.
ultimately for Rotherham, they've just got to. Yeah, I think they go about football the right way. At least you'd rather Rotherham come up and at least try to contribute something different to the league than come up and deploy the sort of typical approach of sitting behind the ball and being one of the least attractive sides you could ever wish to watch. You'd rather they tried to at least make it entertaining. That's
all right, we'll move this conversation on because we could talk for hours on most of these teams, to be fair. But we'll move it on to probably, for me, the biggest surprise package for being down the bottom end this season. It's Derby bloody County. We've had 11 points, 1 win on before discussing them. It's just, I know Rooney's done a little bit, but God, they look awful this year.
I think surprisingly they've been looking reasonably good the last few weeks. They've been on TV a lot over the course of the whole season, but especially since Christmassy sort of time. And I've been really impressed by him, especially Kazim Richards, who, let's face it, came in with pretty much no expectation. And I think he just adds so much more than just goals. He just seems to lift every single player.
Kazim Richards, who I put down as my surprise player from them because of his age. And I don't.
He's been a journeyman his whole career.
See, I didn't put him down as he was going to be there if I didn't put this player down that I'll say later. But yeah, he strikes me as an Olivier Giroud striker, where he doesn't just add goals, he makes the team play better off him, and he gives them a focus.
And he's a sort of striker that you instantly notice isn't on the pitch when he's not on the pitch because he means so much to the team. But I would agree with what Jake said at the start. They are probably my biggest surprise for where they are in the league, and one of the biggest disappointments of the season is the way they've played.
They've got a lot of good young players in that team that I think have got bright futures, but maybe I don't know what's happened this year. But I mean, they're not going to go down.
But I do think they've done the right thing in Rooney hanging up his boots and becoming their manager. I think that's the right move for them because he knows the squad. He's played with the squad now for about 18 months. And
you can't build a team going forward around a 35-year-old that's going to retire in a year or two.
Exactly.
You forget how young Rooney is. 33, 34. It's mad.
And also,
you still can't build a team around that.
Rooney's knowledge of football and his knowledge of that squad that he's been a playing part of now for a little while is invaluable for them, because they don't. With him, they get someone straight away who knows the squad like the back of his hand.
And don't forget as well, he has coached in the academy, so he does know what the strengths
Yeah.
of the younger boys as well.
And he's Wayne Rooney. He's going to have contacts. It's like when Lampard came in and brought in Wilson and
very true.
At the back, Tomori. I mean, Rooney's going to pretty much have the pick of the English youth players to choose from here. So when they stay up at the end of this year, which I think they will comfortably.
Yeah, I think they've got too much to go down.
Really
I wouldn't say comfortably. I think they'll still be in and around it, but they'll be 6 points clearish.
Yeah, if you look at their expected points total, which takes into effect XG and for and against, they've currently got them ranked just 3 places above the relegation zone. So
improvement on where they are now.
Yeah, so they've got nearly a 7 points difference from where they are at currently. So you would expect them to improve, but that much.
I think if you're a Derby fan right now watching this Derby team, obviously you would expect them to be higher in the league, but you'd just be happy with a place in the Championship the next season currently. Because
what do you make of Kamil Jozwiak? He came in this year. I've been really impressed.
That's the winger, isn't it?
I do think he is, for someone who's coming from abroad, and this league's different to anything that he would have faced in any other country. I think he's done well. I would have expected a little bit more from him. If you look at, they signed him and not very many other players. So obviously they looked at him and thought, if we get him,
2 assists though.
If we get him, maybe he can solve the problem of 2 players, because they've not made many other signings. So,
well, you'll see the strangest rumor that I was on. Who was it reporting it? I can't remember where it was from, but there was one of Man City scouts did an interview and said he was high on his private list, and if he's not in the Premier League in 18 months, he would be very, very surprised because of that type of player. He's
looked really.
Yeah,
he got spark.
Yeah, he's one of them electric players like Ben Rama was at Brentford. He could just get players off their seats.
The issue, I guess, with him did I just hear he has 1 goal and 2 assists?
1 goal and 2 assists. Yeah, I searched him up.
That's the problem. You sometimes get these sort of creative, fast attacking players. There are quite a few in the Championship that are nice to watch. They can do any skill you could ask them for, and they're the sort of player that fans go to games to watch, but they don't actually offer much of an end product.
But is there suiting those in front of him? Like, if you're putting the ball into Kazim Richards, where Ben Rama was putting it into Watkins, there's a difference in quality there.
Yeah, again, players like that, it could be down to lack of quality ahead of them. It could be down to a number of things. A little bit of lack of confidence, stuff like that. But I think, he's done good considering he came in from abroad, and that comes with a decent settling in period because of how different this league is.
Yeah, see, I went the other way round. I went Curtis Davis as my signing and star player. I think, although Derby haven't been amazing, when I watch him and he's playing, he drags players, especially with such a young squad, a young core. You need a leader like that. I've been really impressed with him.
I likewise went for a defensive player. He's played holding midfield and he's played centre half. He's just come back from injury, I think, in Bielik. I think that's he. What you were saying about Curtis Davis being a leader, Bielik seems to show qualities in that department years above his actual age.
Yeah,
you would not naturally think a young player like that can come in and make such a difference to a team defensively. But I think he's a very talented player who has a future at least top end Championship, if not the Premier League. Because, I think he's a really good player.
Interesting. Well, we'll start moving away from the relegation zone now, and we'll look up towards the table. Sheffield Wednesday, who seem to have they're on their 3rd manager, nearly 4th already of this season, but have picked undefeated in the last 4 games to drag them clear of the relegation zone on goal difference, currently on 19 points. Another one of them teams that most thought were probably dead and buried until they got their points deduction halved. Oh, they're just such a strange side. I just don't really know what to make of it. Because if you add the 6 points back on, they're mid-table-ish, floating in and around. But obviously they've had that indifferent start, especially with Pulis, who lasted 10 games at best. It's an odd one, aren't they? They're not terrible, but they're not good either. You know, they fall into that category of Derby of just they're all right. They're not great. They're not going to set the world alight. They'll just stay in the division and kind of just sit there.
I think it probably with them it was a case of square pegs round hole sort of thing, trying to play a way that their squad doesn't really have the capabilities to do. And you look at it and you think you've got one of the best passing midfielders in the league, you've got some quick forwards, some big forwards. Why are you trying to play it around the edge of your own box? Why wouldn't you just get it long in behind and you get a bit more luck that way? I think now they're going back to basics and they're getting the ball in the box earlier to the likes of Patterson, who I think has been their star player this season. It's no surprise they're winning more matches. Now they're getting the ball into his head or into his chest, because with someone like him, he's a very talented player.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I watched them against Derby, and Derby should have won that game easily, really, if Derby took the chances. And that worries me. I don't think it'll be as you said, Jake. I don't think it'll be they'll stay safe. I don't, if they don't go on if they don't increase this run or things start getting unrest again, I think they're done for.
Yeah, I think a lot stems on the new manager as well.
Yeah.
Because the new manager can come in and have a positive effect, which is brilliant, which is what they're hoping for. Or he can come in and have the reverse effect, the effect Pulis had, where he just couldn't get it right, couldn't get what he wanted across, and that's going to not help.
Yeah, they're an odd one. Again, going back to the expected points, they're currently sat third in the relegation places with Rotherham and then Birmingham City, who we'll bring up later. So
Yeah.
I just they're one of them that I think they'll just get away. I think, especially in the Championship, where there's worse teams than them that will go down. Who? Not entirely sure. But I think they're certainly worse than currently Sheffield Wednesday.
I think it will be very close cut with Wednesday. I reckon probably looking at 3 points or less between them and the dreaded dotted line at the end of the season. But I think they will have enough to stay up. Yeah.
We'll come to you then, James. And who's caught your eye at Sheffield Wednesday then?
It's been an experienced player that catches my eye every time I've watched him for like the last 5 years. But Barry Bannon,
Yep.
Yeah,
is one of the most
Same as me.
underrated players in the Championship.
100% agree with that.
I mean, he's got 6 goal contributions in a team that are really struggling from centre midfield, 4 assists and a couple of goals, which I think are penalties. At least one of them's penalties, because I can remember him scoring one. But I just think he's one of the best passers in the game. And if you've got a quick runner behind, then he can put balls on a sixpence just to land just the other side of the defender and you're in.
Oh, totally agree.
Or even playing balls up to Patterson. I just think they've been completely wrong the way they've been playing. And the minute they get it right, I just think they'll click.
I think he's a great player. I only put down Patterson because he's everything that is good about Wednesday in the penalty area.
Yeah.
And
I definitely agree with the Barry Bannon situation. He's been incredible for me. He's currently leader in passes into the final third for this season. He's up there in aggressive passes. He's up there in ball progression. You know, he's an incredibly talented footballer and certainly one that tends to go under the radar quite frequently. I think we'll swiftly move through the next couple because we want to get towards the top end of the table. But Queen's Park Rangers again seem to be struggling with Warburton at the helm. They did recruit somewhat with the Eze money in the summer, so we'll have a look and see how they end up moving. But person for me this season, right, I will say Samuel. He's just incredible. He's electric. He does everything you want him to do. He beats a man one-on-one. He's up there with the dribbles per 90s. I highlighted him in the summer when we did the Big Champ preview. I highlighted him as he's got Eze shoes to fill. Has he got the end product as much as Eze? Quite, but he's still 21, 22 years old. Big issue they may have this year is his contract, and they still haven't renewed it yet. And the issue they'll have is convincing him to stay. And if they can't replace him,
leaving in the summer. I mean, he was in Belgium ready to sign for Bruges. So the fact they've had him for this half a year, I think, is lucky enough. It's quite evident, I think, that he probably sees his future somewhere else.
mm-hmm. Well,
So,
Watson has said in recent weeks that the contract talks are progressing nicely and they're close to an agreement. Whether how much you believe into what's said in the press is another question.
Just a case of signing a deal so they can get some money for him, rather than him walking away for nothing.
Which I would probably think more likely. Paul, who was it? Did it? Delph did it. I believe.
It didn't tell anyone he was going to do it, so it looked like he snaked people out.
Bellingham did it.
Bella, I think his was a different case because he'd already signed his professional contract, wasn't it?
Just what I hope Elise and Richards
No,
before they go.
Richards ain't going anywhere, mate. But
Get on to. So
QPR.
come on, boys. What have we got with QPR?
I got Robbie Dickey, big centre half. Probably shows my position, shows what I like.
Have you gone for a single attacking player right now? I think you've
I
gone
went-
centre
I
back
went
every
for
single
Scott
time.
Caskin, thank you.
Okay, we're 5 teams in and we've had one attacking player from.
Probably shows my position, shows what I like, but I love a commanding centre half. Dickey has gone in. Don't get me wrong, with the way Wolverhampton plays, they're never going to be top of clean sheets, but I think he has been head and shoulders above the rest of that QPR defence.
They're quite a young team, to be fair to them. Obviously, the backups not so much, but I do like some of the young players. Who's their left back? It's not Haskalainen, but he is a Finnish left back. I can't say his name. I'm going to butcher it, but he looks alright, to be fair for me. Few question marks defensively surrounding him, but I think has looked pretty good for his first or second season back at this level after a few loan spells away.
I went like Jake for a winger, not a Sai Samuel. Someone else who I think is very good for an age considering that as well is Elias Chair. I think he's got all the makings of maybe someone who can step up to a Sai Samuel's level if a Sai Samuel leaves, because he's got all the attributes a Sai Samuel has, just not quite the same level of end product.
When we had Dino Maramina on, he said he was the best player he's ever coached and the most technically gifted. Not quite a winger in my eyes. I think he plays more as a 10 or behind the striker. So
I think, yeah.
I think he can play anywhere behind the striker, though. I think he can play left, right, or centre.
But the positive for QPR is if you're looking at if a Sai Samuel leaves, do we have the sort of players who could step up without having to spend? I think if you look at him with the right coaching and in the right formation, I think you could potentially have someone who could replace a Sai Samuel if he is to go.
Yeah.
As far as no one's brought up Chris Willock, to be fair, who was a big summer acquisition from Benfica and was just a really strange transfer that sort of came out of nowhere. But he's not really caught the eye. I do think he's struggled with injuries a bit, to be fair to him, to start the season. So has struggled breaking into the side. But out on the left, big promise, wasn't he, at Arsenal's academy back in the day?
I guess he was probably one of those in the Arsenal academy that got to a certain level where Arsenal didn't think he was good enough, but he was still good enough to make it elsewhere.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people in that category.
All right, we'll keep going up the table, then we'll go on to Nottingham Forest now, another one that seems to have stuck in and around the bottom the entire season. Chris Eaton's not quite worked his magic yet, but undefeated in the last 5 games with 2 wins and 3 draws. Is that a sign the ship is starting to turn?
I do think it is, yeah. I think nothing spectacular, but I think a mid-table finish for Forest is what they're probably on track to achieve.
Yeah, I think a bit lower. I think bottom half.
18,
something like that.
And then next year they could be challenging right up there.
Yeah. I mean, this season for them now is get safe, evaluate the squad, get rid of some players because they've got a lot of players on their books, and then you look to next year. I think if I'm a Forest fan, that's what I'm looking to.
Yeah,
get safe, then you look forward to next year.
You're very optimistic about next season if you're a Forest supporter right now.
Yeah.
I think this season, the quicker it's over for Forest fans, the better you can get into the summer and look ahead to next season, which will be a lot more promising.
Similar to in the way Warnock took Middlesbrough last year, got them safe, and look at them now. They've looked a lot better this season.
Yeah.
Than...
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you'll probably see Forest doing a similar thing next season.
One player that I've liked this season is Scott McKinnon, who came in over from Aberdeen this season. I think he's looked really good. Aerially, very similar to what Andy said earlier. Alfie said earlier. In the air, I think he's a very good centre half. Not necessarily the best on the ball, but one that will just do a job, and especially as a left-sided centre half, which seems to be a rarity most teams.
I think for Forest, Ryan Yates is a player who has, I think, stood out. I think he's a very good player in defensive midfield, which is where he's been deployed under Houghton. I don't know if that's his position, but he's a defensive midfielder, reasonably young, good on the ball, good at breaking up.
I think he's like early 20s.
Good at breaking up play, which is essentially what a defensive midfielder is there to do. And
at age 23, he's had a decent season.
I can see a lot of, like, you think of Houghton's previous clubs, the sort of holding midfielders he's had. You can see a lot of similarities between him and the likes of Dale Stevens, who he had at Brighton, who were just don't offer you a great deal. They just offer you consistency, security in midfield, which is invaluable.
Yeah.
He's got a good save on him as well, as we found out at the Badesky.
Yeah, that's the problem. Maybe that's something to do with his youth. I don't think if he's a 35-year-old seasoned pro, whether he's flinging his hand at that, I don't think he is.
I think you'd find most professionals probably would have flung their arm at that. Suarez literally did it on the biggest stage of world football to stop his team and to get his team through.
I think
it shows he'd do anything for the shirt.
Yeah, and I think that's what you want to see. You want to see players. Yes, he overstepped the line, but you want to see that he's committed to doing everything he can for that club.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see a young player doing well.
Yeah. For me, I like Cyrus Christie. They brought him in the summer, steadied that right side down. Don't get me wrong, they lost their best player by a mile last season.
Matty Cash.
But I think Cyrus Christie has done enough. I don't think he's not going to set the world alight like what Matty Cash did. But I really like Cyrus Christie. He's a good bit of experience at this level. He's a Houghton player when they didn't have Houghton in charge to sign him. I really like Cyrus Christie. I think he's a good fullback. So
yeah, so do I.
And he brings a certain experience to this level, and he's a winner at this level. And
definitely,
get them in your dressing room. Yeah,
we'll open this one up with you then, James, for Birmingham. We'll move on to them, who seem to currently be in free fall with 1 point in the last 6, and it all seems to be going a bit wrong for Karanka right now. What's your thoughts on their start of the season? Where do we see them finishing?
It's so difficult because no matter what they seem to do, Birmingham just can't seem to get it right. I thought it was a disappointment because I don't think they could have got much better than Karanka in this division.
Yeah,
some really good players in terms of reasonable names, solid professionals at this level to at least get them to solid mid-table and not another relegation battle. But they just seem determined to have to stay up on the last day every year. So at least they keep it interesting for the fans, I guess. But I think they'd rather a more comfortable survival this year as opposed to the last few years. But I just think they're just missing Lukas Jukovic. I mean, he's been their key player the last 3 or 4 years. He's only got 2 goals this year. So, I mean, that's not enough for your key striker to score goals.
I don't disagree with you on that one. And Scott Hogan's struggled to hit the form that he did, especially in a Brentford shirt. He seems back, and then when he first went to Birmingham. We'll come to Alf then. Who stood out for you at Birmingham, if any? They have struggled in recent weeks, but there's got to be one on your list.
I mean, yeah, it was tough to pick out a good player from a very poor Birmingham side, not just in terms of where they are in the table, but in terms of how they play football. So I've gone with a joint top scorer at the club in Harley Dean.
Harley Dean.
It's a big centre half.
Yeah,
But
I know him well.
I'm excited. I am excited about Jonathan Lecker. I think he's an exciting player. Just hope he can get a bit more game time. And their new signing, Halovic, formerly on the Barca radar. I'd be intrigued to see what he can do at a club that play like Birmingham. I'm not too sure, but I'm intrigued to see him.
Yeah, that's
because
the
he was
issue.
and
They've got
he
some
clearly
really
has
good
talent.
players. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have some really good players like Dan Crowley, who was really good in the Eredivisie. You talk about Halovic, who's been on Barcelona's books. Lecco,
Yeah.
who's an exciting player. And they
Bella,
just play. Oh,
another exciting
McEachran's there nowadays. But they
I-
just play such a turgid brand of football.
Yeah,
Oh,
Ivan Sanchez as well, who I
Yeah.
put down as my star player. He,
Is Karenka really? We'll go back to the expected points. Like they are bottom of that by a comfortable margin, and they're in that bracket of where they're not creating enough and not scoring enough.
I would worry if I was a Birmingham fan right now. If you look at some of the teams between you and the relegation zone,
Yeah.
Forest improving, Wednesday improving, Derby slowly but surely improving, and Birmingham getting worse. I think you've got to be worried that Forest and Wednesday and Derby could all overtake you in the coming weeks.
Yeah,
And
just
you'll-
Birmingham, man. They're an odd side. They've got some really good quality players that we've all gone through, but they are rock bottom currently.
I think their fans deserve a lot more in terms of attacking football. Yes, okay, they're staying in games defensively by the skin of their teeth, but they're not offering enough of a threat going forward.
No, especially with some of the exciting players they have got further up the pitch.
And if you go into games and not offering anything going forward and just intent with, if we can keep it 0-0 for as long as we can, maybe we can snatch a set piece or something, that's not a season-long plan. You're going to come unstuck with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the case with Birmingham, that there's not enough intent to win in their squad.
Completely agree.
Totally agree. We'll swiftly move on then to the next team in the table, which is currently occupied by Millwall, who for whatever reason seem to be drawing games left, right and centre this season, with only 5 wins, 6 losses, but 10 draws at the mid-season point. They do have 2 games in hand though, which could propel them up to as high as 14th from their current position as 17th.
Yeah.
I think
you know what you're going to get with them. They're a solid side that will, if they go on a run, they might attack the playoffs. They're not going to get relegated. Go on, Andy.
As Gary Rowett said, sir, I think they are one of the, and obviously I know everyone suffers with lack of fans, and that's not a card you can play because everyone's in the same boat. But if you look at it, they are one of the clubs I think probably in the Championship who suffer more than most because of what their home ground is like when it is full.
Yeah,
it is probably the most intimidating, if you ask players at any club, where do you not want to play? Millwall would probably be top of everyone's list. And I think not having that fear factor of being able to set the Den up like they would has contributed a lot. I think not massively, but will obviously be a contributing factor to where they are.
Yeah. I think we look at it as if we were looking in January to recruit for them, they need a striker. They've only scored 18 goals this season, which with a strike force of Bodvarsson and is it Smith still there?
And Smith is still there, yeah.
And they got that young guy.
Parrott's gone back. He's already gone back.
Parrott.
Has he gone back?
Yeah, he's getting
I
recalled.
don't think he scored at all, did he? They also, who's that guy from West Brom? Is it Zahor?
It is Kenneth Zahor.
Yeah. And they've got Tom Bradshaw as well, a decent player at this level.
But 18 goals is a concern. So if we're looking at it with a recruitment head on, in January you're thinking we need a striker here. We need someone to spark us. Jed Wallace can't keep bailing us out.
Jed Wallace.
The free kicks.
Yeah, they need someone who they can rely on when they go out on the pitch. A bit like if you look at Norwich, you've got Pookie. If you look at Brentford, you've got Tony. Someone who can go out on the pitch and you know that even if you have a bad day, they're going to score. That's the sort of player you need, probably, if you're Millwall.
And that's their big concern, is their goal. Defensively, you don't have any qualms about Millwall. They've been solid. They've only conceded 20 this season, which is, I think, 3rd or 4th in the league table. But it's that going forward. But again, if fans are back in the ground, do we look at that and think, that puts a fire in your belly?
I think that helps propel. If they could have fans back in the ground for their next game, I think they could put together a run of 5 or 6 consecutive home wins with a crowd like they have at home. But that's not likely to happen at any point in the coming weeks, or probably for the rest of the season. So, but yeah, I'll put down Cooper for their star player because of their defensive record.
What is this? Are we just going for ex-Reading players? We've had bloody McCleary, Cooper.
Playing well.
I am going to admit, when he left Reading, I wasn't really that bothered. I don't think he was that good a player, but he has come on at Millwall and become a very talented centre-half. And when you look at what we could have had in him, it is a bit sort of disappointing that we let him go.
Yeah.
Although at the time I would have done exactly the same.
Now you bring up some fair points, to be fair, but there's always academy players that fall through the cracks. So we'll come to you now, James, then we'll bring it on to the next team of the table, Mark Robertson's Coventry, who have surprised a few this season. I thought expected numbers did show them massively overperforming last year in League One, and again this season, but may just be a case down to the system they play. They currently sat comfortably in 16th, and probably where they expect to be. What have you made of them this season?
I've been really surprised, to be honest. I didn't see a great deal of them last year, but as always, when teams come up, you always expect them to at least be in the sort of near the bottom, which they sort of are, but they're probably looking up rather than looking over their shoulder. And key player-wise, it's got to be Gustavo Hamer in the midfield. I mean, I think he's
quality, isn't he?
Well, yeah. I mean, he was a lot of money as well for a team just come up from League One. Alfie reckoned in the region of 4, but Wikipedia says just something above 1. But that's still quite a lot for a team that's just come up. I think he's got the most goal contributions in the team, and he's looked really solid. He's taken to the championship like a duck to water.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree. We'll rattle through these next couple then, boys. So we'll come to you then, Alfie, for Cardiff, who currently, according to XG, are the most unluckiest team in the division, who instead of sitting 15th, should currently be sat 5th in the table, according to Infogol's model. What have you made of them, and who are we saying is your star player for this year?
Like Cardiff, they are a typical championship team, really. Style of play, you know what you're going to get. It's a tough one, star player. It was between 2 players for me. Sean Morrison, the big centre half, or Kiefer Moore, the big centre forward. But I think for what Kiefer Moore has come in and done to that side, I think he is my key player. He is incredible, and he's a player. If I could take as a backup to Lucas Jat at Reading, I would happily do it. I really like Kiefer Moore. Good on the ball, good target man, good finisher.
If we were looking to recruit in January, what sort of areas do Cardiff need to look at? Obviously, they cleared the books quite heavily with Harry Wilson and to squeeze his wages under the cap. Do you think there's any areas they could improve on in January?
I worry for him. If Kiefer Moore gets injured, I don't see another striker that's going to set the world alight or do what he does. So I'd be looking to get another striker into his mould. Person.
So we'll keep going moving forward then. On to Andy now. We'll hear his thoughts on Luton for this type of the season. They've surprised a lot considering where they were last year, and Nathan Jones has got them playing some good football again, where he left them after jumping ship to Stoke. Who's caught your eye, Andy, and where do you think they might need to look at in January if they want to keep this good form going?
I think for Luton, it's good to see them that they are where they are, because I know they struggled for a lot of last season, and they had some very horrible matches last year that they wish to forget. But I think star player for me has to be Dewsbury Hall. He looks like, for someone who is still at the very beginning of his career, a good midfielder, stepped up physically to the championship as well, which when you're young is not always easy because it is a physical league. And I think he just sums up what Luton are about. Getting the ball down, playing. They're not one for hoofing it long. They're very practical. They try to play through the thirds, which is good to see for a team with maybe not the best resources. To be playing like that is just refreshing.
Yeah,
and
100% agree. I think Dewsbury Hall, I believe, if my memory serves me right, in the FA Cup when Brentford played that pass and he split, I think it was the defensive and the midfield unit with a single pass. It was incredible. But it's nice to see him step up to the physical side of the Championship this season because it's quite hard to adapt, especially coming from youth football, where you're playing kids your own age, whereas now he's playing up against seasoned pros, pretty much 30, 40-year-old men that have played their entire career that don't care how technically neat you are on the ball. So it's impressive to see he's doing well. I think we'll cover the next 3 teams in a similar format where you 3 will chat through your thoughts. We'll move it on to Huddersfield now. So what have we made of their start then?
A little bit disappointed with them. Early signs when the manager came in, I thought they were going to be challenging for playoffs. I mean, they still could if they get a run together. But they're just a bit underwhelming, especially when I watched them against Reading. They just underwhelmed me a lot. But key player's got to be Harry Toffolo. I mean, he's a class act. I think he's got their most assists from memory, or joint most. He looked one of the most danger threats for them when we played him, and he's just an all-round solid player.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Is it Cabral? Is the manager, I believe his name is?
Yes,
it is Cabral.
Bielsa's ex-assistant, Cabral.
Yeah. I think they're a work in progress. I think they've obviously got the money from the Premier League. I think they need a bit of time to recover, get the big wages off the books that they've brought in, and etc. And I think they'll be okay. They're a solid team. If they might be one of them, like Villa did in that season they went up, that make a late assault on the playoffs. But for now, I think it's about solidifying the system, getting the personnel in he wants, and just keep bringing the club forward. I think they're probably in the position they expected to be at the start of the season. So as we approach the top 10 now, we move into the top half of the league with Preston, who, from a lot of people do a great analysis. I believe it's Ollie from the Finney. Does some great analysis pieces on Preston this season and the work they've done and the lack of goal scoring threat they've had. So then to bring a 34, 33-year-old Ched Evans in, especially with the baggage behind him, there's a lot of worry in the camp of Preston fans right now, especially with the direction they're going. What have we seen from them, Andy, so far this season, and how do we think they could potentially improve themselves this January window?
Well, I would be as disappointed as a lot of Preston fans probably are, because I did expect them to be nearer, in and around, closer to the top 6 than they are. Again, like with Huddersfield, there's no reason why they can't make that late assault on the playoffs, but unlike Huddersfield, they seem to be going in the opposite direction to Huddersfield. I don't know what or who is responsible or who decided it was a good idea to bring in Ched Evans. That seems as something that is a little bit ridiculous to me. But I think, as for all their lack of goals, for work rate and just, I think it's what Preston have been all about in recent years, doing the hard yards for each other. And I think Barkhausen just sort of, he may not be in among the goals like he always has been, but everything they're trying to do, pressing, running for each other, making options when the team has the ball, making runs when they don't have the ball. And yeah, I think he is everything that Preston want to do. And if they want to progress, I think they need an actual goal-scoring striker. I know they brought in Ched Evans, but at this level, he's not going to be that. So I think they need a goal scorer.
Yeah, I agree with you. You take away the baggage and look at it in a very black and white picture with Ched Evans. He's never played at this level. He scored 3 goals, I think, in 20-odd appearances at Fleetwood. What on earth is he being signed for? What does he actually bring in a footballing sense to the table? Ignore the baggage, because that comes with him. But then, on a footballing point of view, what does he bring to the table?
I don't really know what he brings. If I'm a Preston fan, I'm sat there looking at that signing and I'm thinking, why? Or what are we doing? What direction is that signing taking us in? I can't answer that question because I myself don't know. I'd be really disappointed as a Preston fan seeing a signing like that.
Right, we'll swiftly move the conversation on to one of my favourite teams this season, who have remind me a lot of Brentford 3-4 seasons ago, where they can do everything up the pitch, but then there are question marks severely over their defensive play, and that is Blackburn Rovers. James, will hear your little piece on them and your thoughts on their start of the season.
Well, it's just been totally unexpected, really, is it? I mean, no one expected the players that they had to go in and do, I think they're the top scorers still in the whole division, which no one expected Armstrong, who's my star player, to have been as clinical as he is. And then obviously you're taking a gamble and bringing in Harvey Elliott, and the gamble's paying off. You've got a very experienced manager in Tony Mowbray who knows what you've got to do in this league, and I just think everything's clicking. I think they can really push on second, especially with Bradley Dack coming back last couple of weeks. Can really push on second half of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if they really, really push for those playoffs.
Yeah, I think the biggest questions for them is defensively. They have some excellent talent forwards, and to bring Dack into that mix, I think Rothwell in midfield gets overlooked quite a lot for the work he does. But there comes a point where you're too expansive in the similar vein of where we spoke about Rotherham, where you open up too much and you focus too much in the final third of the pitch. I think that's where the issues come. It's all well and good that you've scored 38 goals, but you've also conceded 27, which is one of the worst records in the league. It works both ways. So, but no, I totally agree with you. Armstrong's been brilliant this season. Him and Tony's race for the Golden Boot, if you like. Hopefully that keeps as tight as it has been this season. Because I think if them two can push each other all the way, I think we'll see two strikers potentially pushing near 30 goals this season. If they keep going in the similar sort of vein.
Yeah, maybe 3, but we can.
We're thinking Lucas João going to join in the mix. We'll get to him in a sec.
He's pretty much in the mix, but
So we spoke about surprise packages at the bottom end of the table, but then we're not going to move on to them yet. We've got number 10, Bristol City, who seem to have fallen off the wagon a little bit after their positive start to the season, where they sat comfortably in the top 6. Has Dean Holden taken them forward then? That's the big question at the mid-season point.
I think he's done more than what was expected. I don't think anyone expected Holden to come in and to have pushed as well. I mean, they've been really hit with injuries really badly over the course of the season. So when they get fully fit, when they get their full defensive backline back, I think, which is a big, which will have a big impact. I really would, I reckon they'll be where they are now, to be fair, just between the top 6 and the top half. But that's where they've been the last 3 or 4 years under Johnson. So I think for a first season with a new manager, I think it's bad going.
Yeah,
but my key player is Dan Bentley, who another player you know very well, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting stat in that no top half team have faced more shots on target than Bristol City, but only they've conceded less than only 2 sides above them. So they're not conceding a massive amount, but they're facing an awful lot of shots, and that's presumably down to the man in between the sticks keeping them out.
Yeah, Dan Bentley's a very good goalkeeper. I think
against Reading, he was immense. It could have been 5 or 6 in that match.
You touched on it briefly with injuries. I think that's their biggest issue that's killing them this season. I think now currently they have at least 10 first-team players out injured, and not any of them really short-term either. I think Alfie Mawson's done his knee. Ryan Sessegnon did his knee.
Steven Sessegnon.
Yeah, Steven Sessegnon, not Ryan. He's out in Hoffenheim. But yeah, that's the biggest thing that's crippling them right now. I think if they get bodies fit, potentially, they might make a late assault. But I think they'll be happy with where they are currently. 9th, 10th in the league. Alfie, if we were looking at January-wise, what would we think for Bristol? Where do you think if they were going to invest, would they improve the team anywhere?
It's a tough one. I don't think you would. I think you just want your players back.
Invest in the medical stuff. Get some more bodies in the physio room.
I mean, maybe a striker, potentially score a few more goals. Because Naki Wells is their top scorer, but I think, from memory, he scored 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah.
It's not immense goal scoring, is it? So maybe a striker, but at this level, in this financial time, other than loan, I can't really see anything feasible to improve.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was them, it's just get your players back and go from there. Because you look at it, they do have some good forwards. From memory, if you can correct me, but Naki Wells, that Farmer Dehu, who scored the most off the bench.
He's been injured most of the season, so that's why he's slowly coming back.
Got Vyman, who can play up there. They've got Chris Martin, who's not able but they're 4 good options.
Chris Martin was going to be my surprise package this season. I know he started really well in his combinations with the assists. He's tailed off a bit now, but someone that I didn't expect that. He's a good
Yeah.
Championship player, but he seemed to fit Bristol well, especially at the age of 32 now, towards the back end of his career. I've been impressed by him, not necessarily scoring the goals or doing what's needed of him, but I think he fits the system really well of what Holden's trying to play.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with you. Come January, they just need the bodies back. Get the first teamers back into the squad.
I don't think you'd, for the financial time and the money you'd be able to spend, I don't think you'd be able to turn that squad into challenging for automatics playoff.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can run, don't get me wrong, but first season with a new manager, consolidate, evaluate, go again next year, I think.
So we'll move on. We've spoke a lot about the bottom end of the table with surprise packages, but at the top end we haven't brought them up yet. But Barnsley, who after Struber left early in October, have moved on to I can't say his name. Please, someone correct me before I butcher this again. James, go on. This is your one to say. I'll let you do it.
Ishmael, isn't it?
Yeah, Ishmael. I can't say his surname though. I was that is.
Andrew?
I thought that was his surname, Ishmael, isn't it? Like Valentin Ishmael or something like that.
Yeah, we got there. So Valentin Ishmael, to be fair to him, the biggest question marks I have over Barnsley is their attacking system. I've watched a lot of video of Ishmael and his former teams, especially at LSK over in Austria, and they struggle in the attacking, and they're running very, very hot right now in XG, massively overperforming it in most games. That's the big concern I have with them. You know what you get with a good Barnsley team is they will press high, they'll intently, they'll stop you playing out. They saw all the hallmarks of that final game against Brentford of what makes Barnsley Barnsley. But I do have massive concerns about them going forward in the attacking third with the pot shots they take or their wastefulness in possession. I don't think Carly Woodrow is enough to keep them in this position. That being said, they are in a very, very good position right now. And in much like Huddersfield did in their first season, or in the season they got promoted, where they just scrape into the playoffs. They just get into the playoffs and then go on a bit of a run in the playoffs and not have to score a goal and nick it here or there, and you're in the Premier League then, and you're set for life.
I don't think they're good enough for the playoffs. But I don't think that's the ambition at Barnsley, to be honest. I think they're just...
Stranger things have happened. If things happen like that of just sneaking in on the final day.
But there's just so many teams above them.
I mean, what are they now? They're 3 points, 4 points from memory? 3 points,
They
I
are
think?
currently, only 3 points off 3 points off the sixth spot behind Watford.
One win. Playoffs is a potential. I don't think it'll happen, but as Jacob said, stranger things have happened in the world of football.
Truer things have happened.
The big problem with Barnsley, I think, is like you talk about Blackburn and Rotherham, because they are so expansive and they do commit men forward. You're going to get, like you've seen with Blackburn, who concede almost as many as they score, and you're going to get that imbalance.
See, whereas I don't think that's Barnsley are 3-4 years down this pathway. They've got the perfect blend of when to press, when to sit, when to go, when to suffocate, and they're a bit more versatile than opposite teams. I think Rotherham are a progress, whereas Barnsley are probably the best pressing side in the division. They've been doing it now for the last 4 or 5 years in their process, and I really admire them. The one thing that might kill them is the schedule, but I don't have an issue with their pressing system. I think the difference between them, Blackburn and Rotherham, is Rotherham's a bit more chaotic. It's not quite of if I move here, this player steps in here, protects that, this unit then slides across. Whereas Barnsley is a machine, in my eyes. It's very choreographed, like a dance, I would call it. Like they know what triggers what, this is how it goes, and that's just a combination of really good coaching and a system that's been in place now for 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only side better than them at the press last year was Leeds United, and look where they finished.
Yeah. There's not necessarily a correlation between being the best pressing side and the best side, as Rotherham are currently proven.
In terms of what you were saying about systems and how long they've been doing it for, it's not just this is a freak incident.
That's where I have to disagree with Andy on that one. It's not a freak result for them. They are very good at it.
No, I think they are obviously, to be where they are in the league at this stage of the season. They've got to be good at what they're trying to do. But the issue you would have is because obviously, yes, they might know what they're going to do, and yes, they're well drilled in that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that not only do they not have the deepest squad, or I don't think they've got many very good quality options off the bench beyond their first best starting 11. And as the season goes on, unless they address that, injuries are going to kick in. You can't keep relying on the same 11 week in, week out, because that's not sustainable.
Totally.
And I think lack of numbers is something that's going to affect Barnsley unless they add numbers to their squad in the window. Because
you'd be interested to know, to be fair though, Barnsley have made the most substitutions out of any side this year. So Ishmael has obviously recognised the fact that this pressing system is ridiculous to try and play, especially in the Tuesday, Saturday. So he's doing his best to protect the squad, and I just have to disagree with you on this. I think they are so good. Brentford were, if not the best footballing side last season, even probably Leeds were top of them. Brentford were a close second, and they suffocated Brentford. They stopped them playing. They did it with Leeds. They did it with West Brom. They stopped these teams playing at the top end of the table, and it's now proving dividend this season. They've continued that form moving forward. I just have to disagree with. I just think they are so well oiled in their system. They've rotated continually.
Yeah. Well, I've got a question for you then. If you're the Barnsley chairman right now, you're sat in the league table, do you throw some money at it?
No.
Get 3 players?
No, I don't sacrifice the philosophy for the sake of chasing something, because if you throw a ton of money at it and miss out by a point, you've then burdened yourself for life.
But rather than sit there and don't do anything, would you throw £1 million for 2 players?
I wouldn't, no. I don't think you sacrifice what you've built.
But then, are you not looking at the fact that I don't know how big their squad is in comparison to the rest of the league, but they're I don't think they have, and obviously he's understanding that they're going to need to do a lot of rotating, because you can't press like that without doing that. And do they have the squad size to be able to rotate, keep the press as energetic as it needs to be, keep playing that way, and have the number of players to rotate for the number of games? That's the biggest concern. Looking at if that's the way they want to play, brilliant. But if they've not got the size of squad to deal with that, that needs to be addressed.
I 100% agree with you, and it's the biggest concerns I have with most teams that play an intense pressing system. I don't disagree with you. Just the biggest difference between Barnsley and your common team is Barnsley are very, very good at it. And
to be where they are, they have to be.
Yeah. They were unfortunate last year to be dragged into a relegation fight. I think if they had gone down, that would have been a travesty, because the numbers suggested they were a top half team or mid-table team at best, so shouldn't have been anywhere near there. And they were very fortunate to get that reprieve from Wigan. But I love what they've done this season. They've kept moving in the same direction. They've kept building, and I think they remind me very much of a similar team to Brentford. They have a clear philosophy from top to bottom. And every coach, every manager that's been brought in fits that philosophy. Every player they buy fits that philosophy of what they want. And I think that's the most important thing, is you don't sacrifice what you've built for short-term success. And they'll be better off in 3-4 years than if they throw money at it in this January, panicking, trying to get players through to get up. Because they're not good enough.
You don't have to not spend money. As you say, they recruit very well. They recruit for their style of play. So do you not, of the fear of falling off at the end of the season, like what happened with Leeds for 3 or 4 years, do you not spend 500k on a player that has been on your radar and you've searched and you are interested? Do you not spend that money in the position there?
It depends on what the manager's feeling. If the manager's feeling and it ticks all the boxes, then yeah, you would probably go for it. But I don't think there's necessarily... January's a weird window.
Well, I think they're in a strong position. 9th in the league, the way they play, I think, a lot of people, if they came in, you would consider them.
January's a weird one for windows, because a lot of teams panic buy. We've seen it with Peter Road and Wingy turning up at random places. So
yeah, but I'm not saying you go out and just throw 10 million at a player that you weren't even looking I'm saying if you have some targets that you were going to wait till the summer, do you not maybe throw 500 grand at it? I don't know. I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Position they're in, I think this is the strongest position to acquire targets they've been, obviously without looking at the financial impact, but in terms of where they are in the league, what they're doing, what they've implemented, and their style of play, it wouldn't surprise me if I saw a couple of additions to that Barnsley squad. Even if
there's going to be
from a top club.
There's going to be a lot of players who will look at that Barnsley squad as well and go, do you know what? That's the sort of club you want to be involved in. They play the right way. They have this built-in philosophy. They're doing well. Why wouldn't you want to sign for Barnsley?
Yeah, I mean, think about a City Academy kid. Oh, what's that? The name of the guy that came on, the 17-year-old in the cup. Do you not look at that? And if Barnsley come in for you, the style they play, similar to Man City, obviously not so much possession, but press high, win the ball back, I'd look at the prospect. I don't know what he'd think about it, but I would. Where Barnsley are in the league, how they play.
It's a certainly interesting one. We'll go to a polar opposite style, then we'll get James to sum his thoughts up. And then Alf will come to you for 7th in the league to sum up before we go on to the top 6. But James, if we thought of Stoke this season, Michael O'Neill's now had just over a year.
I think we're finally seeing the Stoke that we should have seen last year, really. I think they finally got a manager in that is making the most of the players he's got. And a squad of Stoke's quality should probably even be higher than they are now, but at least they're in the mix of the top 6. I think Tyrese Campbell being out for the rest of the season is going to be a big miss.
Yeah, that's terrible.
When you've got the pulling power that Stoke have, and you've got the on pushing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on Stoke. Campbell being injured is a massive miss for them, especially in the manner that he's now out for at least 12 months, potentially with a knee injury.
Yeah.
But you also be looking at that is he's now going to stay for a few more years. You get him signed onto a massive contract, keep him extended. There's an opportunity here. How many top flight clubs now are going to look at him and go, oh, we might as well sign him? Because you don't know what type of play you're going to get from him. So it may, for the future of the football club, play into their hands a little bit. In the way of, right, you sign this contract, we'll keep you on the same money, but a bit longer. If you come back on you're on fire, we'll sell you. If not, you've got the security of a big contract behind you. It's a bit of a win-win for Stoke, obviously not on the pitch currently.
Out of interest, when does his contract run out? Do you know off the top of your head? I
believe it was 2022 or 2023.
Oh, so he's still there for quite a while then.
A year or two, you ask, is he coming back fresh off a knee injury, Just like for the team, it might be worth looking at getting his contract extended. We did it with Scott Hogan. Look at him, he turned back up and was incredible. I had to correct myself, Campbell's contract runs out in 2024, so he must have recently signed a new one.
Okay, yeah, he doesn't need to sign a new one then.
No, actually, I'd take that back. Fair enough. I should always check before I start spouting rubbish. But he's a good player. Who's been your standout player for them this season? Because there's quite a few young lads that have come through that I think have been decent this year.
Tyrese Campbell. But in terms of my sort of under the radar, I've got Jordan Thompson in midfield.
Oh, good shout.
He's
very good shout. I had him down for that.
But he's sort of a player that just goes a bit under the radar, just doing the dirty work in the midfield. But I thought he looked good against Reading. I think he played the full 90 in their 3-0 win against us. And I think he's a player that's got a decent future. He's already a Northern Ireland international. So, yeah, I think he's one that's not being spoken about much, but I think he's really key to Michael O'Neill's plans.
I had Harry Suter as mine, the centre half.
I also had Harry Suter down.
I like
22,
him.
He's been decent.
He looks like an exceptional player.
He's also mine. Surprise, surprise, another centre half.
Yeah, how many more do we want to go through with you? Right, we'll let Alfie, you're going to sum us up. Middlesbrough, Mr. Warnock himself. Give us a few words on how we think they've done this season.
Warnock. Do you know what you're going to get? You know where you're going to end up near. I've got to say, I'm a little bit surprised because they were actually quite good to watch when I watched them on the telly. Yeah, but with Warnock, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get defensively sound. And I think it goes to show when my three, if you like, standout players for him is Dale Fry, centre half, Dyke Steele, who I think he's a great player, and I believe he's just signed a new contract as well, which is great news for Middlesbrough. And then Paddy McNair, ex-Man United and ex-Sunderland. He's been a revelation this year under Warnock. He's looked like the player Man United probably thought they were going to have. He has been a very, very good player this year.
No, I totally agree with that one. Andy,
have
so
got-
if we were looking at this from January point of view, are we thinking they're going to recruit anyone or kind of stick out with what you got?
I think that comes down to really whether Neil Warnock thinks they need to, because if you're Neil Warnock and if you're Middlesbrough, Neil Warnock is you're not going to not listen to what Neil Warnock wants, because he could get you into the Premier League, and that's brilliant. If he thinks they need to recruit, then they will. I still think they could do with a little bit more sort of creativity in midfield. They're scoring goals, they're creating chances, but you can never score too many goals. And especially looks at the goal records of some of the teams in the top six. If they want to be matching with that, then maybe they need a little bit more in the final third. But if Warnock thinks they're fine, then they're going to listen to him and they're not going to push him to sign anyone. It's going to be a case of whatever Warnock wants, Warnock's going to get.
No, I definitely agree with the Warnock statement, Andy. Like, if he's looking for a certain type of player that fits his mould, I definitely think they'll recruit some in January. But it depends what he feels the side needs. But as we go from the rest of the league now, we'll go into the top six and those that currently occupy the playoff places, with sixth position and Watford currently, with a Premier League squad many thought more to come from them this season, but a bit of a slow start and already on their second manager, so probably expecting another two to come through the door already this year. So we'll come to Andy first. What's our thoughts on Watford? How do we think they've done this season?
I think they're not setting the world alight like I think they should with the squad they've got. But to be in and around the top six, you can't really argue with that. That's what they wanted. I think they should be scoring more goals. They should be winning games more comfortably than 1-0 or 2-1. But I'd be happy if I was a Watford fan with where they are. But I think there is still a lot more they're capable of. And that only sets them in good stead if this is where they are when they're not really, I don't think, at the peak of their power at the moment.
No,
I think
I agree with you on that one. It's a bit odd, isn't it? Like, a lot of teams we've seen it come down before have struggled to go straight back up, but we currently have all of the bottom three occupying the top six from last year. So there's one area I did want to focus on is obviously their defence has been one of the staples this season, but someone like Ben Foster currently is top for goals conceded from outside the edge of the area, which is just worrying for a goalkeeper that he's making some excellent saves, don't get me wrong, this season, and we've seen him bail them out quite a few times, but to breach that continually from outside the edge, did that not raise some concerns, Alfie, for later in the season that might come back and bite them?
I mean, I still believe that Foster is the best keeper in the league. I don't know whether he's unsighted. Or I haven't watched many Watford games, but he is a solid keeper, and a lot of Premier League sides would even take him. So I'm not too worried about that stat. I'd be more worried if they were spilled through his hand, or not even diving for him, or making mistakes like a Reading keeper that we may come on to later. But yeah, no, I still think he's the best keeper in the league. So I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Watford fan.
When we get on to Bournemouth later, I'll bring up Begovic because I think he probably pips it out, and there's probably two or three above him that could probably take that crown right now. I think you've seen it with Foster, that lob from 25 yards, the one where he kicks it into the legs of Campbell. Just little mistakes that happen as a goalkeeper. You're always going to get exploited, but not necessarily enough for me to take the top crown. We'll come to you now, James, then. From watching Watford and looking over their players, who have you seen as like their star player this season?
Well, funnily enough, I actually had Ben Foster as my pick for my star player. Only Swansea who conceded less goals in the Championship. But I just wanted to have a brief mention for João Pedro, because I know he's dropped off a bit over recent, but I thought the first few weeks of the season he really lit it up for Watford. And when they're on TV a lot, when they just came down, he was the standout for me. I know he's young and he's maybe just not quite in form at the minute, but I think there was a real player in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, someone that's only scored 5 goals this season in a pretty dire Watford attack, if we're being honest. If you look at what Deeney and Gray have managed to contribute to that front three, front two, that there are concerns there. So Pedro's probably the best of a bad bunch right now. But
From memory, isn't he the top goal scorer?
João Pedro.
Yeah.
I believe he is so far.
I mean, at 19 years old in the Championship, that's not bad going, is it?
Not bad,
Yeah,
no,
he's
but
a
5
striker
goals in a maiden season is so, considering you look where Tony is, or someone
He'll
like
get you off.
Ricky.
He'll get you off your seat though, which is what people want to go and watch football for. I know they can't physically go and watch them, but you can watch it on the telly. And he's a player that you would want to go and watch. And for someone so young, he's definitely got a bright future ahead of him.
I think the worry for Watford is that, yes, they're very good defensively, but I don't see that with the attacking quality they've got, the quality of the attackers they have available. You think of Sarr, you think of Deeney, who's been a seasoned professional at this level before. There's not enough goals in that team for that quality of player, which would be a concern if I was a Watford fan looking at the quality and then seeing the goal output. I don't think the two match up necessarily.
Yeah, you can definitely see the comparison between them and the top 6. Watford have the lowest goals out of anyone in the top 6 with 25, with Swansea then second with 27 goals. But every other team is in the high 30s, mid 30s at that point. And you're looking at Watford thinking, how long can they keep this run going and keep 1 or 2 points here and there? You know, there are cause for concerns, but they have now got a new manager in, someone that players, and I think Foster covered it on his YouTube channel, wants players to be expressive, wants them to take a risk, wants them to be more expansive. So I think they're a bit unfair to judge right now because they're a team in transition again. But I think they'll definitely be up there coming in 46 games. No doubt, because just purely on quality of squad, they are probably the second, third best team in the league on paper. I think we'll move on now to your guys' favourite teams, and we'll bring in Reading, who seem to be the Analytica enemy right now, with defying all odds and expectations with the current stats. I know we've discussed it quite frequently on here, and I'm quite big on Reading. I like the process of Paunovic. But is it enough for a top 6 finish come the end of the year? We'll come to you first, Alf, on this one.
I mean, considering where we've been the last couple of years, I don't care if people are annoyed at us saying we're going to fail, because right now, you know, considering we're in transition and he took over a week before our first league game, where we're sat in the league table now is dreamland, really, when you consider where we were and what we've been doing for the last couple of years. Do I agree with the stats? I'm not so sure I agree. I like watching teams, and if teams excite me, and the way Reading are playing, there is an identity there right now. There's a defensive identity and there's an attacking identity. And I think that's the process. If you merge them together, then we'll be a good side. But you saw in the first 8 games where we had the best defence in the league, in all the top 4 leagues in England, that the defensive identity was there. Now we're scoring more goals and creating more chances, but we're now conceding more. So it's about finding that balance. But, you know, where we are in the league, it's just dreamland right now. Yeah, so I'm not going to knock the team at all.
I don't necessarily agree with the whole point of transition. Like, I think I've covered it quite a bit in the summer. The Paunovic plays a very, very similar system to Bowen. They are both stylistically quite similar to each other. That 4-2-3-1, build it through the wide areas, roll them in off the wings and then get the fullbacks out wide. I mean, they're quite similar in that sense, so I don't think it's a case of a transition. I just think you've got players like, and I'll come on to him now, Elise, who has stormed onto the scene this season. Lucas João, who's performing beyond wherever he has done before in his championship career. I think you're just finding players that they paid quite big money for in a while ago, like Luko's, who was 7.5 million. João, that was potentially rising to 5 million. Now starting to perform to a level where they should have been. And I think it's a culmination of Reading have a decent squad. And I believe, who was it? There's another football analyst on Twitter, that's the handle, I believe. he covered it perfectly. It was like, we're finally seeing a squad that spent a lot of money on it performing to the level we expected it to be. And I wouldn't call them surprise package. You might disagree as Reading fans, because they've obviously been in a relegation fight for several seasons. But a lot of investment has gone into that team, and that team is now playing to the level you would expect it to be, from my view. That being said, do I think it's sustainable? Not really. I think Reading will tail off. I don't think they'll finish top 6 this season. But it's a process. If you ask them in 2-3 years' time and Reading are competing at the top again, you'd like to think that's going well for them. And it keeps moving in the right direction. It's going away from the last 4 or 5 years, which, beyond Yapstan's playoff run, has been quite turgid and pretty terrible to watch. We'll come to you, Andy, on this one then. For Reading's star player, there's quite a few contenders, I can imagine.
I think there's 3 or 4 that have played really well this season and who I think probably all deserve equal amounts of credit. But if I had to single any one player out, I think it would have to be Laurent in midfield. I think to come up from League One, to come up from the level of League One where Shrewsbury were bottom half, fighting to stay in League One, and to come into Reading and do what he's done and look like he's been a Championship player for years is, I think, credit to the staff that are coaching him. I think is also credit to him as a player, and maybe credit to the system he's been put in with having Rinamoto sat next to him at times holding his hand when he needs it. I think that helps him. And I think he probably has been our best player this season. He doesn't get the credit because he's not a goal scorer. He does a lot of the work that fans don't notice. A lot of the ugly side of the game, I suppose you'd call it. But I think, yeah, he's a very good player. And for me, he's been player of the season up till now.
That's interesting. He's one of them. You look statistically at him, and he didn't look anything special, if I'm being honest. It was a bit of a punt for a free signing, but he stepped up to this level. And to be fair, him and Rinamoto have looked really, really good. It's a solid pairing. What's your thoughts on Reading then, James? It's staying awfully quiet for Reading.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying the ride. It's unusual to be in such a high position, and obviously comes with that is other teams looking at your players, and obviously we've a lot of rumours about Elise and Richards, who have been a key part of this team, both leaving. But yeah, I'm just sitting here just enjoying it, to be honest. If we get top 6, we get top 6. That wasn't the expectation coming into the season. We can kind of try and fly under the radar. It'll be less easy to do that than it was in the first half of the year. But we're up there now. Let's just give it a good bash. I mean, we've got players coming back from injury, so we can finally fill out a proper squad rather than having to fill it in with youngsters and unproven players. But if we can keep Zhao fit, I think that's the key. Is if Zhao fits, there's no reason why we can't stay top 6. If he doesn't stay fit, then it could be a different story unless we find someone who can adequately replace it.
That was going to tie into my next question of then January. Obviously, Lucas Shaw has made up nearly 40% of all Reading goals this season. Who would you look for in January to potentially replace him off the top of your head? Obviously, Brexit has screwed over a lot of teams currently.
To be honest, I would be looking to replace Zhao. I think with the likes of Mace can play up front, with the likes of Puskas coming back as well. And we have in the past few weeks played a false 9, which hasn't looked terrible against the best teams. For me, I'd look more so at left back. I think we're now resigned to losing Richards, unfortunately for nothing by the looks of it. So we've really got to try and, because he's the only left back we've got in the club, other than young Ethan Bristow, who's not been played. So I think a new first team left back has to be brought in the club either now or the end of the year. And then it depends what happens with Elise. If we can sell him for the big money that we expect that we should be able to get for him, then we can really invest, wisely with the money we've got. If it's true and there's this release clause for 7 or 8 million that the Sky are suggesting, then it's going to be more difficult. But yeah, for me, I don't think I'd go out to spend the big bucks, because we haven't, we're still under FFP issues, so we haven't got the big money to spend really on replacing Zhao. We just got to hope that he stays fit and hope that other players can step up to the plate in the running and do a job if he's not around.
Yeah, in a similar situation as to what Alfie said with Barnsley, if you look at that as the owner, and Dai Young has put a lot of cash behind Reading, do you not look at this and think this is probably the best chance we've got in a long time to probably get a top 6 performance? Do you think he might throw the cash behind it a bit off and go out and get a few more players just to bulk the squad up?
No, I can't see it. Not with FFP restrictions. I know that COVID has given clubs a little bit of a relax on the strict financial regulations, but as you said earlier, this is a squad that's not come together cheaply. If you look at the forward line, if we do lose Zhao or Elise, there is Puskas behind who's reported to be a £7 million player, or a Luco who, I mean, we brought for a bit too much money, but a £7 million player. Ajaria, a £3 million player. I can't see it happening, especially with the quality of youth players that we do have coming through. Like, don't get me wrong, we don't have an option at left back, but our Ben Gibson on loan from Everton, fantastic option there. Played really well, then got an injury 6 weeks out. McIntyre, a young centre half, goes in, fills at left back, has a man of the match performance. We are very strong in our defensive numbers through the academy and in our creative midfielders.
That's where none of the money was spent. I mean, our whole back line cost £1 million between it.
Exactly.
And that's probably one of the standout. I know we've conceded a lot, but that's because we've conceded a lot in one game as opposed to consistently conceding a lot of goals.
I was going to bring that up. Raphael was going to get brought up because currently you have conceded nearly 10 more than Bournemouth have, conceded nearly 7 more than Brentford have, conceded 11 more than Watford have. Is this leakiness going to cost you in the end? And Raphael, despite for all his qualities this season, I think he's got one of the highest save percentages in the entire of the Championship.
But then you take out 2 games in Bournemouth and the Coventry game. There's the 7 goals extra that we've conceded compared to Brentford. It's big score lines that have hurt that record. It's not like we're conceding 2 every game. We're either conceding 1 or none, or 4 or 3. There's no in between, unfortunately.
Huddersfield went up with a minus goal difference. So I think if it's enough points, and it's irrelevant. I mean, let's face it, if we do go up, we will be the Huddersfield of this year. We're not one of the big guns that's expected to be up there. It will be unexpected, and there's no, goal difference. If you're scoring enough points, then it's irrelevant, isn't it, really?
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll move this conversation on into the next team in the top 6. We're going to Brentford now, and we're currently on 16 games undefeated across all competitions until Tottenham dumps us out of the cup, but that's another question for another day. We've looked good. I think we have looked consistent, and that is something that has changed. We've only lost 3 games this season, which is, considering where we were a few years ago, is bloody good. Our defence has really stepped up in recent weeks, despite the constant rotations and fitness concerns we've had for a lot of players. You look at it, and I'll come to you lot as an outside point of view. I just think Brentford are just different this year. We're no longer that electric team that people feared with BMW last year, because they were just incredible. I think we are a bit more methodical, a bit more work it around, take your time, slow it down. We don't press as intently as we have in recent years. We've slowed that down. And I think that's the biggest difference this year between Brentford. But it's been more effective. We've won our last 3. We've not lost in nearly since October. At the end of October, we lost to Stoke. And we're making that assault and gradually climbing up towards the top 2, which is the aim coming into this year. But we'll come to Andy on this one. What's your thoughts on Brentford? Who stood out for you when watching? Do you think summer or the January will be for recruiting a few more?
I think you've hit the nail on the head perfectly with Brentford, a different team to what they were last year. Because what they are is they're a team that I would fear because there's goals all over the pitch. They've got some fantastic forwards. They've got height from set pieces. So they possess an aerial threat from corners and wide free kicks you can whip into the box. They're they're a team that can not only break a team down that sits behind the ball, but they can play an open game with the best in the league. If you want to go expansive against Brentford, like Norwich, and commit your fullbacks forward, then they can take you in a game like that as well, because they've got the ability to do that themselves. I do think they are, for me, a nail on for at least the top 6. Where in the top 6, I don't know, but I can't see them being anywhere below 6th place. I think for them, it's just about when the playoffs come around, if that is their end goal, when the playoffs come around, it's about what your form is like going into that, because that makes a big difference. They're in great form now, and if they're in this sort of 15 games unbeaten when the playoffs come around, no reason they can't win them and go up. But the issue they had last year, when they had a very good season, is that towards the end, their form wasn't perhaps the best.
No, we definitely not stumbled towards the end, but I mean the issue is we'd gone 8 games unbeaten, or won 8 in a row to even get in touching distance.
Yeah,
so then miss out so cruelly. You know, it works both ways.
It was a case of you don't want to be stumbling over the line into the playoffs, so to speak, like they maybe were last year. With, I know they fought tooth and nail to even get into that position, but it's you want to be going in the sort of form that Fulham were going in, and where they'd won 5 or 6 matches at the end of the season. Everything was clicking, and if you go in like that, I think Brentford, if they end up in the playoffs, I think they have a very good chance of winning it, because I don't think, with the assumption that Norwich will be one of the top 2, the only member of the current top 6 I think would beat Brentford would be Norwich. And assuming they're going to be in the top 2, if Brentford can make the playoffs, I think they'll win them. So it's just about staying up there, getting good form, and hoping Norwich get in the top 2, because I think if they do and Norwich avoid the playoffs, then Brentford will win them and go up. So very.
You say that because when we played Bournemouth, they were very, very good for 35, 40 minutes. They dominated us. We didn't really have an answer to them. And then I think second half we grew into the game a lot more. I mean, we got towards them, but Bournemouth are a shoo-in for me. That I think they're another one of them guaranteed top 6 teams. They looked incredibly good.
Yeah,
they are. But they're not consistently good, as you've just pointed out there. They blew you away for the first half, and you came back into the game in the second half, and you would have fancied. I mean, you did fancy yourself. Obviously, you won the game. It's the same with Reading. We absolutely blew them away the first half. They come out and score 4 goals in the second half. You know, but consistency is key. That's why I would back Brentford over Bournemouth.
Mm-hmm. Who stood out for you then, boys, from the Brentford squad? Because I'm more biased in this one, but we'll get a few names from you guys.
If I had to pick a name, of someone who has stood out for me, I think David Raya would be one, because I know he got criticised in the playoffs last season for the error he made that put Fulham ahead, and I know he's not had it easy because of that. That can't have been he can't have been coming into the season with much confidence after that, and the way that he's played this season, I mean, he's an outstanding goalkeeper. Let's not beat around the bush there, but he's just a new level beyond where I think he was last season in terms of his coolness on the ball. Reminds me a bit of Alisson and Edison and Neuer and the like. And yeah, I think in him they've got one of the top goalkeepers in the league.
For me, it's 2 that have gone slightly under the radar. Rico Henry and Josh Silva. I've both been really impressed with. Rico Henry stood out to me when he played for Walsall, Dean Smith and Reading beat him 4-0 in the FA Cup, but I thought he was a real talent and a very strong attacking left back then, and I think he's gone from strength to strength. And De Silva's another one that just gets on with the job. Doesn't tend to get many plaudits from the outside, how Brentford people think about him, but it doesn't seem to be talked about much on Sky. But
He got loved on Sky for their Tottenham coverage.
I was going to say,
There's a full 15 minutes about him.
2 players under the radar, and they're probably the most biggest standout players other than Tony.
Well, they're not Tony and Buemo.
It's interesting you bring De Silva up, because he's been odd this season. He's not been himself. Like last year, he was tearing teams apart in the final third. It was brilliant. But with Norgard being injured, he's kind of had to drop in alongside, and play as a second pivot, which is so then we've gone, instead of a 1 and a 2, we've gone more 2 and a 1. which is, I think, it's restricted him a lot this year. And I know he had a really good game against Newcastle in the Cup and was pretty decent against Spurs as well. But I think that he's just had to drop deeper, so he's not affecting the game 10, 15 yards higher than he was last year, which was where he's so dangerous. He's brilliant where he overlaps the fullback and gets in, and we saw it against Newcastle. That was probably a textbook De Silva performance, and that's the nearest I think this season he's come to his best. I don't think he's been as good, but then also he's not scoring as much, and he scored some incredible fluky goals. Well, not fluky goals, but low probability goals last year. So there was always going to be that drop off. But yeah, it's interesting that from the outside you think he's probably been our best player when, for Brentford fans especially, I look at
It's
it and
got to
think,
be Ivan Toney. I can't look past him.
You're saying Tony.
Yeah,
It's got to be Ivan Toney. The way he's come in and fitted seamlessly into that side, it's got to be Ivan Toney for me. I was a
£10
big
million
fan of
man.
his. I was such a big fan of his when we played Peterborough in a pre-season friendly, and we went and watched. I was so impressed with him, and I wanted Reading to sign him. To be honest, he was absolutely class, and I'm not surprised with how well he's done at Brentford. But
Yeah.
even saying that, he's a level above where I thought he was going to be. I thought he'd be on about 10 goals, but to be on top scorer in the league, he's been their best player for me. I enjoy watching him as well.
Yeah, he's an exceptional talent. I just think I don't know. I would say he's probably been their best player, but to avoid all of us saying Tony, I thought I'd throw in someone else.
Yeah, I think Rover Analytics did a good thread. He's not had as many goal scoring chances in recent weeks. I think he's had like 6 or 7 shots in the last 3-4 games, which isn't a
Hopefully
lot.
that carries on next week.
Yeah, for a striker, but then you think someone like Panos has upped his game. And Buemo has got a brace recently. Front three's clicking and starting to get into gear now and work its way out. But we could talk about Brentford and Reading, to be fair, to death, but we've got another 3 teams to cover, so we'll move on to them lot. I know we touched on Bournemouth's a bit of inconsistencies a minute ago, but they currently only lost 1 game in 6, currently on exactly the same record as Brentford, with also the game in hands as well, but above Brentford on goal difference currently. Jason Tyndall came in after Eddie Howe decided to depart. They've kind of hit where they expect again. Probably we're hoping to be top 2 by now, but on the cusp of it, 2 points off. You can't be too disappointed if you're a Bournemouth fan right now, can you?
I mean, win your game in hand and you're second. So, yeah, as a Bournemouth fan, you would have expected this, I think. There's no other way for it. They probably on paper have the strongest starting 11 in the league. Some of their players are absolute quality. I mean, Dominic Solanke's what, a £25 million man? Probably hasn't done as much as I thought he would do in the Championship, but that's the way it goes sometimes, isn't it, for strikers?
Yeah, it swings and roundabouts. One player for me though, Asmir Begovic, who according to XG has prevented over 7 goals already this season for Bournemouth. And he went on that miracle run before playing Brentford where they hadn't conceded in 7 or 8 games beforehand. And they were the first 2 goals he'd conceded in a long while. I think he is bailing them out big time right now in front of a really strong defence with Jack Stacey included in that. I think that's the difference. I think when Bournemouth might creak into them top 2 spots coming into the year. Begovic is a step above. I love how Andy compared Raya to Neuer and stuff. But I think Begovic has been massively overlooked this year for his importance to that Bournemouth team. You've got to bear in mind, they've got the 3rd best defence in the top 6 and conceded 18 goals in 22, which is an incredibly impressive number. And and Begovic has stood out for me, and some of the saves he made against Brentford until we breached him was just world class.
Oh yeah, some of the saves he made against Reading as well.
Keeping his team in it.
And I guess that's what's invaluable when you're in and around the top 6. You look at some of the goalkeepers that are playing for the top 6 sides currently.
Oh,
and that is what gets you in the top 6. That's what keeps you there. The sort of goalkeepers that Watford have, that Brentford have, that Reading have. The goalkeepers that can pull out the sort of camera saves, if you like, but can also do the basics very well. The catching from corners, the kicking the ball to a teammate rather than to an opposition player, and things like that. And I think what Bournemouth have is not only a very well-rounded keeper and a defence that I think most people would envy, but some very good attacking players, like David
Definitely.
Brooks, for example. He's for me probably their star player. He's just.
rumoured to be moving on to Arsenal allegedly come the end of the year or come the end of January.
I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal were linked with him. He's the sort of player who I think could play at that level. He's a very talented. I know we say this about a lot of players, but I think he is too good for the Championship. I think I'm surprised he stayed when they came down. I thought he'd have moved on in the summer after their relegation, but he hasn't, and he hasn't let that affect him. He's played as if he's not concerned about what club he plays for. He just wants to do the best he can, which is you don't always get with some players.
Obviously, we look at Bournemouth compared to their financial prowess compared to most of the Championship, and they've already proven once before where they just blew FFP out the water in order to get promoted. If we're looking at in January, would you throw the bucket at it again? Or would you just maybe 1 or 2 or none at all and keep going in a similar sort of vein?
Not with their squad. I don't think you need to.
Again, I second that. I don't think you need to. I think you just got to ride it out, carry on playing how you are, and you'll be in the top 2 at the end of the season without a doubt.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. If you've got a target that you're looking at and is available, go for it. But unless you are 100% set on him, I don't think you need. Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere in that squad that I think needs strengthening. So
I think the issue is we're going to see it a lot this January with Brexit causing issues, because obviously a lot of teams are going to try and adapt to these new work permit regulations. I don't think we'll necessarily see as much recruitment as we have previously seen in January, because a lot of teams are going to be trying to work out and see who they actually can buy. Because you think a lot of players in the Championship probably won't qualify for a work permit, especially with the finances involved in the deal. So I think it'll either go 1 or 2 ways, in my opinion. I think we'll either see a raid on the lower divisions, someone like Brandon Cooper that's already been recalled from League 2 back into the Championship now to play as backup, or it will be a complete just nothing. I don't think we'll see anything or movement because they just don't really know what's going on. I know we have the tribunal this window, but I don't know if it will necessarily work for every team. But we'll see. I know we've touched on Swansea. I just mentioned it there with Brandon Cooper coming back in. They're a team that, after the playoff semi-final defeat last year, I know there was a lot of pessimism amongst Swansea fans about the team being dissembled and Brewster going back, Huey not potentially coming back to the side. But they've defied odds this season and currently sit second in the league, albeit with a game in hand over those below them and only 2 points clear, so potentially could lose that spot come the end of next match day week. But they've been a good side. I think Steve Cooper's done a fabulous job with that team. And I can't praise them enough. They were good against us in the playoffs. They were really good and unfortunate, just getting knocked out in the end against us. But they've taken it up a notch again this year. They've done really, really well to continue going in the similar sort of vein where they were last year.
yeah,
I think for me, they're probably the team that I would give the most praise to in the entire division, because I think to do what they did after like you said, their team could have been easily dissembled and they could have felt sorry for themselves. They couldn't get their loanees back and they could have dropped off. But watching them against Reading the other day, when they were on TV, they play some lovely football. They play football the way it should be played. Fullbacks high, overlapping centre-backs at times they did against Reading because they dropped off so deep. And how they didn't win that game, I'm sure their fans still can't work that out. But yeah, they'll be there or thereabouts at the end of the season. Top 6 for me, I think, alongside Bournemouth and Brentford and Norwich, they're probably the top 6 nailed on.
Yeah, I've loved watching Swansea this year. To be fair, echoing your thoughts. And when you look through their team, it's not a team full of superstars, really, other than Andre Ayew. They're just run of the mill. Connor Roberts is great at this level, but I mean, who'd have thought Jake Bidwell, going from QPR, who've been struggling the last few years, would just suddenly go straight into a team right at the top? But he's think he's got the most assists in the team, which from a left back ain't bad going. But obviously Bidwell's someone you knew well at Brentford. But I just wouldn't have expected him and that collection of players who've done so well. But hats off to him because they've done brilliantly.
Yeah. What worries me about Swansea, probably more than other than Watford, is if Jamal Lowe suddenly goes back, but doesn't start hitting the target as much and scoring as many goals. Other than Ayew, I don't really see who else can take the load off, especially now they've lost Morgan Gibbs-White, who's gone back to Wolves. They recalled him. Maybe if I was a Swansea director or a chairman, that's probably the area I'd look to strengthen.
Yeah,
I think.
Someone like Ayew's got 8 goals this season. Jamal Lowe's on the same, but a lot of them have come in the last 4 or 5 match days where he scored a brace against Watford, a brace against Cardiff.
Yeah,
I do understand the concerns there. There's probably that drop off from the
That's-
attacking side of it.
yeah, that's the only area. Like when you look at the other top 6 sides, other than obviously Watford, who don't really score a lot of goals, you do have a standout goal scorer in that side. You got Tony, Zhao, Solanke, and Pookie. You don't see that at Swansea. If it's either Ayew or Lowe, and if one of them goes, then teams will probably mark the other one out the game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the only area of concern I'd have about Swansea. But they are a lovely side, play lovely football, and that will stand in good stead.
I do like Steve Cooper. You raised an interesting point about goal scoring. Ayew only has 1 less goal than Solanke, but I'm not entirely sure on Bournemouth's spread of goals because I think theirs is a lot more spread out than, to be fair, than most other teams.
There's. I
So
think
there you go. Someone like Solanke has only contributes 24% of all of Bournemouth's goals, where someone like Armstrong is 42%, Tony's 44%, Zhao is 38%, Pookie's 35%. So, and then Ayew is 30% of all Swansea's goals.
Squad strength where you have Solanke, Sturridge, Josh King. They're 3 class strikers that would get into most other championship sides.
No, I don't disagree.
So, yeah, I'm not surprised Bournemouth is more spread out.
That's the big thing. I think 60% of all goals from Swansea have come from Ayew or Lowe this season, and Lowe has scored 6 in his last 5 to 6 appearances.
Yeah, that's the only thing that would worry me. But
they
do play lovely football.
I think for Swansea, yes, they don't have the spread of goals, and maybe they don't have the list of goal scorers the other top 6 clubs have. But when you defend the way they do, when you have the defensive record they do, when you've got the defensive setup they do, they probably only need to score 1 goal in most games because the way they defend, they're going to keep a hell of a lot of clean sheets. They already have, and I'm sure they'll continue to do that. And so they're probably the sort of team that will nick a lot of games 1-0 because they're probably the best. Well, I think for a fact they are the best defensive side in the division
at the moment. Yes,
and I think that might be their plan. Sort of, if we can keep ourselves in the game, then we dominate the ball 99 times out of 100, and we're going to create chances. And all we need is 1 goal if we back ourselves to defend.
I think that Reading game highlighted that issues with the attack. Unfortunately, for as solid as they were, they couldn't find the net for the life of them. I know they should have probably scored 1 or 2, and Raphael made probably some wonder saves in that.
Yeah,
but
that's the chances they missed were criminal, really.
Yeah, the chances you miss, 9 times out of 10, if they play out a game like they did against Reading, they'd come out winning. It's just Reading earned a bit of luck. Swansea missed a fair few chances. It's just one of those. You're going to get those throughout the season. Every club gets them, where you do everything you can and then you still don't win. That is.
I totally agree. I think we'll go on to the top of the tree now, and we'll close this up with our last team. Norwich are an interesting one who kept hold of Daniel Farke despite relegation last season and continued where they left off in the Championship last time, where they currently sit comfortably at the top with a 6-point lead to date from the 3rd position. But they do obviously have game in hands because of the fixture schedule and all that jazz. I'll come to James to open up on this one. Meeting expectations, or do we expect them to run away with it now?
Yeah, this is probably the least surprising. kind of finish out of all the teams. I fully expected Norwich to go straight back up. The way they managed to maintain the squad, pretty much that got them up in the first place, they kind of kept, other than obviously people like Lewis, they managed to more or less keep the squad, and just with the same management, same style, just put them back out on the pitch. And what a surprise! They're still better than most of the teams in the division, and they've done really well, to be fair, with all the injuries they've had, to still be comfortably clear at the top. And when those players do come back, then I think the rest of the league are in trouble when they are at full fitness, because they haven't been the last few weeks, and they've still comfortably beaten most teams. But yeah, I fully expect them to win the league quite comfortably come the end of the season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The fact they managed to keep hold of some of them players, like Buneda, Aarons, it's just incredible to see them keep going. And I think they're looking at it again in the 5-year plan. I know we chatted about it previously, of what happens if the 5-year plan goes wrong. Well, they're currently executing it to a T. They can get back into the Premier League and keep their philosophy and keep building. I think they'll be a team that we might see solidify their place in the Premier League not before too long.
I do think they're resigned to losing Buendia now, though. But I mean, the fact they had him for as long as they did, I think, was criminal, really, and that no one came in earlier. He's been an absolute joy to watch when he's been in the Championship, and he fully deserves his move to a high level. But how they reinvest that, I think, is then going to be key. How do you replace someone like Buendia?
Where is he alleged to be going right now?
Arsenal are the favourites, I saw.
I did see that as well.
I think
a step up and a half.
I think what you have to praise Norwich for is that they have stuck to their principles, because they could easily, and it would have been, you wouldn't have really moaned at them or thought they'd done the wrong thing if they'd abandoned ship with Farker at the end of the season. And they deserve what they're getting now for sticking with him. Because to have that faith in a manager who, let's be honest, I know their squad wasn't great, but they did, even with the squad they had, they would have disappointed last year with how easily and how much of a whimper they went down with. And I think to stick with him took a lot of backbone and soul searching, I would imagine. And they deserve what they're getting now for doing that.
I think it reminds me a bit of the Burnley situation when they came down and stuck with Dyche. I think Stuart Webb's an incredibly smart man. It's built an incredibly good system there at Norwich. So I would have it would have been a massive surprise, in my opinion, if they had sacked him. Just considering they had let them go all the way down before even doing anything.
Yeah.
Keep going, Andy.
Even with that in mind, you still got to think it would have been a surprise, but the way they went down, and 9 clubs out of 10, if they went down like that, would get rid of their manager. I mean, you look at Watford, they went down, sacked their manager. Bournemouth did the same. Well, not sacked, but he walked away. So it's not very often you see a club go down and keep the manager that sent them down. So fair play to Norwich for doing that, because they deserve this now because they made that decision.
I think we'll probably see them stretch out in front a little bit more. Personally, I think they'll be the ones that will set the pace, and if anyone can catch them, I'd be thoroughly surprised. We'll come Alfie to wrap it up for you. Star player on the Norwich side for you, and we've gone Buneda, we've covered him, so I'm expecting another centre half considering the theme we've had for the rest of the squad.
I've gone with Todd Cantwell.
Ooh.
I really like Todd Cantwell. I think he's a class player, and I mean, to replace Maddison the way they did with him for coming through their academy, I mean, I think he's going to go strength to strength, and obviously I do expect Norwich to go up to the Premier League this year, but if they do come back down, I think he'll be the one this time that would then leave, because I think he's a Premier League player in a pretty much Premier League side playing in the Championship right now. And when he came on against Reading for the second half, he changed the game. He changed the way they played, and he was incredible.
Do we not look at his stats though for the season with only 1 goal and an assist to name?
Yeah,
over 12 appearances.
And he's finding form, and the Norwich style of play is more than just about goals and assists, I think. That's why he stood out to me. When he came on, he changed the game with his movement and his 1-2s and his quick passing. And his energy at the press, and I think he epitomised what Norwich were trying to do that day. That's what I went for him.
No, perfect. And go on then, James. I know we said we'll finish it with Alf, but we'll hear from you lastly.
What about Norwich?
Yep, go on then. We'll close it out. Who we say?
Oh, I went for Buendia, but I also think special mention must go to Grant Hanley in defence, because he wasn't particularly key the first time they went up. He played a bit last year, but now this year he's probably first choice alongside Ben Gibson when he's back from injury. And I just think he's been a key part of both going for, providing a threat going forwards and being defensively strong with Norwich. You know, everyone gives Pookie, Buendia, Cantwell praise, but defensively, him and Tim Krul in goal, they're a solid outfit all over the pitch. And I think Grant Hanley to have come back, despite being at the club for 3 or 4 years, to now finally force his way into first choice defence, I think good on him for his attitude.
Yeah, so that's a nice left field pick, to be fair, to finish it up with. I think we'll leave it there, boys. This one is a mammoth episode. I think we're just shy of the 2-hour mark for this one. So we've got a bit overboard, but hopefully we've gone into a bit of detail. You enjoy the listen. All I can say is hope you had a good Christmas and New Year, and we'll on to the next one. Thank you and goodbye.